Let's move on. We're going to talk next about Sega. Something that we don't talk about nearly as much as we probably should, because Sega has kind of taken a backseat in the gaming industry over the last decade and a half now, I guess. More than that, really.
Yep.
Like 20 years. It's hard to believe. But the big news is that it is Sega's 60th anniversary. It was on June 3rd. They launched June 3rd, 1960 is when Sega started. Mm-hmm. So they just passed their 60th anniversary.
Out of a military situation, actually, because that's what Sega stands for, is service games.
Yep, that's true. A lot of people don't know that either.
Came from the occupation of Japan post-war.
That's right. Yep. And so it just passed its 60th anniversary. Obviously, Sega has had an insane history inside the gaming industry. I will say this, Sega didn't celebrate it as much as I thought. It kind of slid under the radar, and I wouldn't have even known about it if it wasn't for a product that Sega decided to announce on the anniversary. And that is Sega Game Gear Micro. The Game Gear was Sega's attempt to take on the Game Boy way back when. While the Game Boy was monochromatic, the Game Gear had a full color screen. It also had the screen that was landscape oriented instead of having kind of the 4:3 aspect ratio that most TVs had at the time. Its battery life was abysmal. It would rip through 6 batteries in about 3 hours, and that's being generous. Honestly, it
depended on the game.
Yeah. My experience was actually shorter than that, closer to an hour and a half or 2 hours.
I never used it with batteries.
You always used the
AC adapter. There was no point. It was not a portable system.
You're right. It was pretty much just a console that played old Master System games. So at least that was the initial idea, was that the Game Gear would be very easy to port the library from the Master System to the Game Gear, so that Sega didn't have to spend a lot of... Basically, Sega was trying to avoid the problem that Nintendo has had for the last 20 years, where it's trying to support a console and a handheld at the same time with unique software. It wanted to have the handheld and just port all the stuff from the Master System to it, and they thought that would be good enough. It ended up none of it was good enough. It did end up selling 11 million units, which I was pretty surprised to read. But the problem with it was that Sega just wasn't in a position where it could supply exclusive software for the Game Gear. And so instead, you just kept getting all these ports of old Sega games to it in conjunction with the battery life and all the other issues with it. It just eventually died. And obviously, we all know the Game Boy ended up reigning supreme. So to celebrate the 60th anniversary, Sega is re-releasing it kind of. They're putting out 4 different handhelds, and they're really small. You don't realize how little they are until the very end of the trailer, where they actually show human hands holding it. And it's literally they're this big. So there's 4 different ones. They're 4 different colors, and then each one of those comes with 4 different games. So if you want all of them, and right now in Japan, they're going on sale October 6th for around $50 a piece, depending on the exchange rate at the time. So to buy 16 Game Gear games and 4 little handhelds, you're going to spend $200.
And more than that, if you want the magnifier thing that lets you actually see the screen, because those screens are 1.15 inches.
That was the other big complaint about it, was that the screen was too small. And as Matt just mentioned, you could get this magnifying glass thing that would hover above the screen and blow it up so you could see what was going on. I mean, it became canon, really. Sega accepted it as a part of its sort of official lineup of peripherals.
Yeah, I never had that. But,
I didn't either.
I thought it was fine the way it was, but this is not fine. It's not.
How do you feel about this, Matt?
Well, here's the thing. I love the Game Gear. I had a Game Gear when I was a teenager and played it all the time. It was my favorite thing, because I also, for a long time, I was not allowed to have a console in my room because my dad read an article when the Atari 2600 was out that that video games hurt the TV. So it's probably a thing about burning.
I remember that rumor actually floating around back when. Now here's what'll date me, people. Back in the day, before cable TV, the way TVs worked was they had 2 screws on the back, and what you did was you had these kind of hook things that had a wire on each one, and you slid those underneath the screws and then screwed the screw down. And that's how your TV got a signal and got channels. Well, when you would buy a video game console back then, you would get this little box with your console that had like a slider switch on it. And it also had the same pronged wires on it. And you would slide those underneath the antenna wire on your TV and then screw them both down. And then when you wanted to play the game, you'd slide the switch to game. If you wanted to go back to TV, you'd slide the switch back to TV. And I know that might blow your minds, but and then you had to have your TV on either channel 2 or channel 3. And a lot of the boxes that you got had a little switch on the bottom where you could switch from channel 2 to channel 3. And it mattered. For some reason, the reception that you would get on those channels would affect how clear the signal was from the video game machine on the TV. I know it sounds archaic.
It depended because in some places there was no station on 2 or 3.
Right.
So you had to pick the one that had no local station on it. So like where I was, we had a channel 2, KTVU in San Francisco. So channel 3 was the channel you had to use for games.
Yeah.
It was a weird time.
It certainly was, but made it work.
But he read a thing that like basically said like you could hurt the TV by playing games on them. So I was not allowed to use play games on any TV because he didn't want his TVs hurt. So the rule became if I wanted to have video game consoles, I had to buy a TV
or get a Vectrex.
Because he was like, well, if you want to damage your own TV, that's up to you. So that is why I started working under the table at places at 13. Because I wanted a TV.
That's funny.
And but until then, I had handhelds because that didn't require a TV. And a couple times, I think I did try to point out, like, you'll notice I'm playing on a TV screen on this tiny TV screen, and it is not being hurt. He's like, shut up. So that was the end of that. But I was big into the Game Gear. So
yeah, Matt has something he wants to show you guys today.
These are all my Game Gear games.
How many do you have total?
I don't know. This is like 8, 9, 10, 14. 20 something.
Do you remember how many games ended up being released for it before it was?
Oh, there was a couple hundred.
Couple hundred?
These are all my manuals.
Do you have your Game Gear there so you can put it up on screen?
No, my Game Gear is missing somewhere.
Oh.
I don't know where. It's probably in a box somewhere because it doesn't work anymore. The one interesting thing about it is, so I got it and I got it home and I played it for a while and I turned it off, went to bed, woke up the next morning, I went to turn it on again, and there was an ant in it. There was an ant in the screen, like running around the screen. And I'm like, there's an ant. Why is there an ant? And so I noticed it as I was going to turn. I turned it on, and the ant just got fried.
Got zapped.
And so there's a dead fried ant in my Game Gear. So every time I would play it, I'd have to like shake the dead ant off the side, so it wasn't on the video part of the screen.
That's hilarious.
And here's a little. This is a little fold out thing.
Like a poster, right?
Yeah, it came. I am assuming. I opened it earlier. I'm assuming this came with Batman Returns. Yeah. Because it is Batman Returns.
Yeah.
I played that for the Sega Genesis when I was a kid.
A bunch of these.
Yeah.
And here are your accessories, including you can see the TV tuner on the Game Gear there.
Yeah, you can see
with football. That was what they always showed. Is you can watch football games on the Game Gear. That was the big thing. So yeah, I'm a big Game Gear fan, and I am not going to buy this bullshit because what?
Dude, it's the biggest ripoff ever.
Are you kidding me?
Dude, those things, I guarantee you, they probably cost $3 to manufacture.
Yeah. I would absolutely buy like a normal size or maybe even slightly smaller, like 3DS sized Game Gear Micro. I would buy a Game Gear console that hooked up to the TV and played stuff. But no, like, what are you doing? No.
It's not. That's not a celebration, Matt. It's Sega celebrating getting like a 500,000 percent profit margin on these things. That
is nonsense.
Yeah. So they come out October 6th in Japan. They haven't even announced them for the West yet, meaning U.S., Europe, North America, all that. Do you think they're going to come out here? And if they do you think that they will lower the price?
I don't think they will come out here because
either.
I think Sega of America is going to look at that and be like, really? No, like, come on. Like, again, I think it would be cool to see Game Gear pop, like a Game Gear celebration thing pop up that is an actual decent size to play, or even like a micro console. Like, I mean, look, if the TurboGrafx can get one, Yeah, because there's some great stuff on that system. The Sonic games are actually pretty good. The first one is just the Master System port, although it has some really good music, some good versions of the Sonic themes in there, and other themes. One of the I think the second zone, maybe the third zone. Like the song in that sounded familiar to me forever. And even like I brought it to college with me and my roommate would play it and stuff. He's like, why do I know that song? Everyone was like, why do I know this song? And it wasn't until like a few months ago that I saw someone did a YouTube video about game songs that are ripoffs of other things. And it's the Full House theme. Like that's what it was. I'm like, like 25 years. I wonder what that was. But like all the Sonic Chaos is really interesting. Triple Trouble is really interesting. Like there's no version of that on anything else except at the time. The Game Gear Shinobis, GG Shinobi and GG Shinobi 2, phenomenal Shinobi games. Incredibly good. Yeah. Also,
the B-roll that we're showing for this shows almost every major game.
Also some really good music from Yuzo Koshiro in those. Defenders of Oasis, solid Phantasy Star style RPG that almost no one's ever heard of. There's a decent Shining Force on it. Axe Battler, Legend of Golden Axe is this crazy like Zelda / fighting game action RPG that stars the guy with the barbarian guy from Golden Axe.
Yep.
Running around. It's a huge game. I played that game over and over again. There's a mediocre Castlevania ripoff called Vampire Master of Darkness that no one's ever played. Like there's some like stuff on that system that never made it to anything else.
Lost in time.
They're sort of like lost games.
Yeah, and it's like because of the resolution of the games, it's hard to even imagine them wanting to port them or update them so they're just kind of lost in time.
Weird little things in a year ago. X-Men, the game's master's legacy. Not on anything else to my knowledge.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying you want to play it. I'm just saying it's there.
Yeah. So do you think these will turn into collector's items, Matt? Like,
I mean, they might.
Because they are expensive, and that is one of those things that kind of helps with collector's items. Was the initial cost pretty high? And they are, for sure.
Look how dumb child me was. Look what I spent money on. Yep. RoboCop versus Terminator. What are you doing?
Why wouldn't you, man?
It was terrible. I mean, there's no way to know that.
Dude, you just love RoboCop and Terminator. That's all.
The other problem that was like the kind of problems of the day when you owned handheld systems. This is a problem for Game Boy people too. Not a lot of rentals.
No.
Like you couldn't really rent handheld games.
GBA you could at Blockbuster. They rented GBA.
Yeah, later on they did that.
But that's it.
Yeah, there was one store in Palo Alto, like down the street from Stanford, that rented everything. They rented Lynx games and Game Gear games. I did a lot of renting from them, and then they closed because that's not a very lucrative business, turns out. But it was good times.
So we've talked about the Game Gear for a good bit, and the Micro, again, which is coming out October 6th in Japan. Let's talk about Sega in general, because this is its 60th anniversary. That's a huge deal. It's a company that has had several different phases. So I did want to kind of go back and pick a best and worst Sega moments, and then pick the best and worst Sega platforms. So Matt, let's start with best Sega moment ever. What's your pick?
Ever?
Yeah.
Like business-wise or like game-wise?
Just whatever resonates with you for Sega.
I mean, I was a Sega kid, so like there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
So I guess it could be Sonic 1, which I played to completion until 3 a.m, and then as soon as I finished it, started again, which I rarely had ever done in my life.
Yeah.
I mean, the big one is probably getting a Dreamcast. Import Dreamcast 98. My mom got it for me for Christmas a year before it came out here. Of course, the only games that were available were Mahjong and that terrible Godzilla Generations game.
Yeah.
Which she did get me the Godzilla Generations game, so I played that for like a day. And then Sonic Adventure came out, I think the day before Christmas in Japan. So the import shop in Burlingame I would go to got it like a few days later. So I think the 26th or 27th, I went in and got it there and took it home and played it. And I specifically remember I played the first level. Everyone kind of seen like on the beach with the killer whale and all that stuff. Everyone said, "Oh, that was really cool." And I got to the second level. In the middle of the second level, a tornado hits and like sucks
like
the whole level
one.
up. Like it's like
in the game.
In the game, like the tornado hit. We didn't have tornadoes in San Francisco. But like a tornado hits and like sucks the whole level in, and the level becomes like a manure. And when the tornado hits and it pulls back and Sonic sees it and everything in the level gets sucked into it, I remember I just started laughing. Like I was because I couldn't believe it.
Super Mario 64. Yeah, the first time I played it, it just made me laugh. I didn't know how to react to it. So I just started laughing, and that's all that. My mom did the same thing the first time she played it. However, I was asking for Sega's best moment, not like your best moment related to Sega, the company Sega's best moment ever.
Oh, does it have any of those?
Somebody said that in chat. Eric Cartmenes said, "Is there a best Sega moment?" It's tough.
I mean, they haven't had a ton of successes, really.
Yeah.
Like I guess the Genesis, like putting the Genesis out ahead of the Super Nintendo, and like how kind of almost overnight, like because Sega wasn't a factor during the NES period. Like
Master System.
I had a couple friends with Master Systems. I had the Game Gear. Like, you know, we liked them, but we knew we were like kind of the hipster alternative kids because everyone had an NES.
Yep.
And when Genesis came out, I remember a couple of my friends got one. One of my friends got one because his mom was like worked in marketing for Sega. Like a marketing company was handling Sega, so he got a Genesis before it even came out. And like I remember, we were at his house before we were going to go out to like back to the park or something. I think to play baseball actually. But he had a Genesis. This Genesis was sitting there, and we're like, "What the fuck? What? Like, where did?" And so we played some Altered Beast, and his older brother, his friends came in, and his older brother and his friends did not care about video games. Like they were like, "Whatever, that's for baby." Like they were like
the typical mainstream perspective on games.
Born in like 70, they were a little too old to care.
Yeah.
They came in, and one of them, like the biggest jerk about the NES stuff, came in and saw this. And it's like, "When did you get a Genesis?" And I was like, why does he know what a Genesis is? Like to know what a Genesis was at that point, you would have had to basically been reading the game magazines, right? Like it wasn't out yet.
Yeah.
And so I was like, if he's paying attention to this, there must be something
maybe
to
it ain't
it.
so bad.
So I guess that's probably the biggest success they ever had. Like, I mean, they really spent the remaining 10 years of their existence as a console manufacturer trying to recapture that moment.
I'd agree with that, but my moment is 9999. And I was around for all the stuff that you talked about, but I was never so hype for a Sega product as I was on 9999. I was all in. It was the first real launch event that I had ever like really gone to. I don't know if it was really the first like everybody's mobbing the GameStop launch event, but it was the first one I had ever been a part of. As far as pre-ordering it, going like 5 hours before the store opens, standing in line with a bunch of gamers, waiting for them to open the doors, going in and get your... That was the first time I had ever gone through any of that. And the other thing I would say about it is that the Dreamcast delivered. It was great. The hardware was good. The games were great. It's not Sega's fault that everybody chose PlayStation over the Dreamcast and decided to, devote their resources to PlayStation 2. Online play on a console that was reliable and stable. Just a lot of paradigm shifts. Just the visual splendor. It was the first time I ever saw a video game where I kind of understood what HD was. You don't understand what I'm saying? Where I was like, okay, now I know what high definition is because I can see it here on my Dreamcast. So I would say Dreamcast was peak Sega. But unfortunately it was a mountain spike and then a very precipitous fall down the other side of the mountain.
I mean, you can see back there, the shelf, like right on top of my finger there, that's all Dreamcast.
Yeah.
There's Wii here. This is Wii. But the back behind there, that's all Dreamcast. Under that's all Dreamcast. Behind those is another row of Dreamcast. I have tons of Dreamcast games. And
I was so hyped for launch. All my friends were hyped. All my friends were hyped for launch. Oh, nice.
It's a Kickstarter that it's like a fighting pad for Dreamcast. So I still keep up with the Dreamcast stuff. Yep. Like it's still hooked up and ready to go.
Yep. So I'll pick the launch of the Dreamcast. Mitch, do you have any input on this?
I mean, if I'm going to pick something different than you guys, I would go with the release of the Sonic movie being the most successful animated video game.
You mean just like from a few months ago?
Yeah, from a few months ago. I would say.
So out of Sega's 60 years.
Well, I'm only saying that because you guys have picked two other areas that I think I would have chose one of those two things. But
What
I
about,
wanted to do
like-
he
something
can't
different.
pick the Saturn launch.
Yeah,
right,
like,
exactly.
I
But
mean,
what about like the launch of NFL 2K? Like it really just completely flipped.
to be
football
truthfully
Sims
honest,
on his
my
head.
only experience with Sega was we had a Genesis at home, but we never had. I played the Dreamcast at my babysitter's once, and that's how I played the Sonic game that was there with the Chaos Emeralds, the one that Matt was talking about. But I mainly did Nintendo if it was going to be a handheld, so I don't have much experience with Sega as a console manufacturer, mainly just their games. And so I think it proves with saying the movie and saying that's a successful thing for them, that overcomes a lot of huge properties. Pokemon is a huge property, and yet Sonic can still overtake that, and it's been out for decades. That's impressive. I think that's worth saying.
I think that's a good point, really. I mean, the Sonic movie did do very, very well at the box
getting a
office.
sequel.
It is getting a sequel. It was possibly the last box office hit for a
That's true.
long time.
Forever.
But yeah, it's probably the most successful thing Sega's done since the Genesis. Really?
No.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. What
No,
else? What else
they've
made
had
that
tons
much
of
money?
games come out that have done very, very well.
Not like that.
Well, it's a
But
movie.
this is beyond games. This is mainstream.
Yeah, but games routinely make more money than games because they cost more. Like we brag about that all the time, that the video game industry makes more money than the movie industry and the TV, everything.
Well, on the
combined.
whole, not
Yeah.
per product. There's only
that's-
like 2 games that have ever made $1 billion.
But like what I'm saying is like, if I can't think of another like more widespread hit than that Sonic movie for Sega in a very, very long time. Like, and most of it would probably
Yeah, but
also
that's
be
also
Sonic.
not. I mean, that's also not Sega. Sega didn't make that movie. It just sold its license to somebody. Sega
No,
had nothing
they,
to do
they
with it.
produced it.
No,
They
We
made
get
a
it.
production company to
They didn't
work
make
with them
the
to make the
movie.
property.
No, they did. Sega did establish a Sega Pictures company to actually have input. So they made
Which
it
is
as
probably a group of like 4 dudes who watch the cuts and say that's not Sonic, that is Sonic.
For
They
the
weren't
references that
they
are in
weren't
this movie,
shooting
I would doubt
and they
that.
weren't cutting it together. They weren't
yeah,
directing it.
but in a incredibly strange world where Sonic the Hedgehog wins an Oscar, they get the Best Picture trophy.
Which it is not going to happen. But-
No, but what I'm saying is, as much as anything, like that's a success
Wait, those
story
4
for
guys
Sega.
would get the Oscar instead of the people who actually made the film?
The producers get the Oscar, the Best Picture Oscar. Yeah.
Really? Wow. Oh, I'd be really salty if I were the director of that film.
Well, that's what the Best Director Oscar is for.
Oh,
Is
okay.
that-
And
that's the
they're
whole point.
definitely not winning that one either.
I mean, let's not forget that the Oscar structure was designed by producers. I mean,
it makes sense. They rigged it in their own favor.
yes, that's literally what happened there. But
Yeah. I would say this though. First of all, I would not attribute that movie to Sega. But even if you do, if it's true that that is the best thing that Sega has done, that is pathetic. Pathetic.
better Nintendo's done.
No, Nintendo has released consoles and games
the realm
that
of
are selling
movies is
in the
better.
Billions. Sega's not a movie company. It's a video game company. We're not
Sega's
talking
barely a
about-
video game company.
they're a video game company. Somebody said in chat, and they made a good point, is that Sega has become the best publisher of strategy games, which is true.
Yeah, when they bought
Because
Creative
they
Assembly.
bought Creative
yeah.
Assembly, they just became that by default, essentially. But if you're looking at that movie as the best thing Sega's done, first of all, shouldn't be attributed to Sega. But if you are saying that that's the best thing that company has done, that's terrible.
Wait,
that is not something to be proud of.
How would you not attest to that? It has brand name recognition for the masses, and that's why it was so successful. Like, not just because it was a good movie, like I think it was a good movie, but the brand name itself have lasted this long, and with so many horrible games that they've created with this property specifically, it still does really well at a box office. I think
And it did
Sega
better
does
than-
earn
There
Sega
haven't
does
been
earn that
terrible Sonic
reputation.
games.
What are you talking about? There's been
Sonic being
plenty.
terrible is like the constant meme of Sonic's been terrible forever.
Sonic 2006 was terrible. The rest of the
Everything
games are like middle of the road.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Go look at the aggregate scores of their
I
games.
don't give a shit about the aggregate score.
Okay, so
those
you're
games
right
have
and
all
everyone
been
else is wrong. Fair
the
enough.
entire fan, like that's the running gag, dude.
No,
like the bad Sonic,
that's common knowledge.
The Sonic cycle is a constant meme. Like everyone says, like, oh, it's gonna be good this time.
You're barking up the wrong tree. I hate Sonic more than anyone. Like seriously, but I'm telling you the truth. And most of those games end up around a 6 or a mid 7. That's just the facts.
But that's
and if
not
those
good.
aren't bad.
And I'm saying I don't give a shit what reviewers gave them. They're terrible games for the most part. Like everyone's afraid to give anything under a 7. I'm glad they get their balls in line when they give it a 6 Sonic Unleashed or whatever the hell. But most of those games are awful.
I agree. I hate them, but that's not what everyone else thinks. So
it is what everyone else thinks.
I'm not going to sit here and say
I don't care. I don't care what reviewers think on that one. Like the Sonic fandom, like is a constant cycle of hope and despair because of how disappointing these games continually turn out to be. And look, I stopped playing them.
A lot of people like them.
I stopped playing them.
I don't like. And you also forgetting about.
I stopped playing them somewhere around
86. Look, I'll go through all these right now. Sonic Mania 86. Sonic the Hedgehog the movie 47.
How about this? Don't
Sonic
even
57, 57, 86.
You're barking up the wrong tree if you think quoting 82. Bullshit Metacritic averages is going to tell me that a game is any better than it really is. Like I'm
just telling you what most people think, Matt.
For God's sake, your editorial department of game trailers gave Amalur a 8.2 out of 10.
I would never tell you that you don't know what you're talking about with Sonic or whatever, but I'm saying that the vast majority of people do not think that all his games are terrible.
No, you're wrong. Like that's it. I don't give a shit. I don't give it. Stop it. Really, dude, stop it. Like really stop it. I am involved in the Sonic fandom more than you are. The fans do not think the series is any good.
Though. I'm not talking about
the people who actually play the fucking games. I don't care what 15 game reviewers thought in comparison to millions of Sonic fans.
I mean, I
actually finally showed up and embraced the goddamn movie.
I can find one Sonic game on Metacritic ever that rated below a 50, and that was Rise of Lyric at a 32. Everything else.
Wait a minute. Where's 2006?
Like
2006 didn't rate over. Did 2006 rate over a 50? No way.
I don't know.
Bullshit.
I don't know. Some people gave that game. No, it got a 46.
Play Magazine could not have tilted
46
that hard.
for Sonic 2006.
So you 46. think you think 46 is an accurate rating of that game, and you're going to use the rest of the review scores to prove the others are decent?
Considering one guy gave it a perfect 10 that threw the whole thing out of whack. Like,
who gave it a perfect 10?
Remember that dude in the magazine? You've talked about it like 100 times on GameFace.
Halverson gave it a 9.5. He did say the load times were a little long.
This is getting absurd.
And then he downgraded it to an 8.5 when all the issues weren't fixed.
Let's talk about the worst moments from Sega's history. I'll start. I'll go with the Sega Saturn because it was dead in the water when it got there.
Be specific about that launch. Tell the launch story.
We've told the launch story of the Sega Saturn like 100 times.
I mean, it's really the story of how Sony won before they even tried.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that to me was the lowest point. And if I did have to point at a single moment that was the worst for Sega, it would be that press conference at E3 where Sony walked up and said the price of PlayStation 1 and walked off.
I mean, I think that's incontrovertibly it.
Yeah.
Like there's no, I mean, that's
because that really was the beginning of the end for Sega.
Yeah. Nothing. They never recovered from that. There was no way to recover from that.
Yeah.
There's no way to recover from charging $100 more and expecting people to buy Bug and Clockwork Knight. Like there was just no way around that. I think the second worst would probably be when they shut down the Dreamcast.
Yeah.
Like
or the
not that it was a bad move, but it's just like it was sad.
Yeah. Well, it was sad for me because I literally was working in the same building as them.
Right. Well, I mean, it worked out for us because we got to go upstairs and buy Dreamcast for $2. But like
nothing. Yeah.
It was sad. You know, that was the end of that era. I
felt really guilty. I remember
it was picking over a corpse.
I bought a bunch of stuff that I didn't even want because I like got like a couple pieces of hardware and I'm like, I can't give somebody $8 for a Dreamcast and like 10 games. So I just started getting like VMUs and controllers, and I got a Dreamcast keyboard and a Dreamcast mouse, all of which, by the way, are still unopened, sitting in the packaging that I bought them with that day. They gave me no use whatsoever. Because
the mouse and the keyboard might be worth something now.
It's still brand new in the box. Brand new.
You should look up some eBay prices on those.
Yeah, I have 5 VMUs. Still brand new in the box, still with that plastic tab that you have to pull out to activate the battery. Like I just,
God, I wonder if those batteries have corroded by now.
They might have. They're still in the box. I haven't opened them. I just felt so bad. I was like, I can't pay $8 for a Dreamcast. I can't. So I just started buying stuff just so I could give them more money. And I ended up never even using most of it. So that probably is personally, like going back to how you like related a personal story to it at the beginning. That was probably personally my lowest day as a Sega consumer. But I think Sega as a company's lowest day was the Saturn for sure. Mitch, you have anything outside of that you want to discuss?
No.
Okay.
I mean,
you could also go with the 32X if you wanted to, but
yeah,
it wasn't
Sega
that important.
CD, 32X, those were all black eyes for Sega for the most part.
The 32X wasn't like the gut shot.
Yeah. Do you think Sega will last another 60 years, Matt?
I don't know if we're going to last another 60 years.
Well, we're not. I definitely won't. I'm saying, do you think 60 years from now, Sega will still exist as a company?
I'm going to say no.
Yeah. I'd probably go that way too. Because I just don't see upward momentum for Sega. It hasn't managed to come up with new ideas that people like. It's still milking its old IP. I feel like even if they did a good job of reviving that stuff, they might have a little bit of a spark that they could build a fire from. But it's like it's lost its creative spark. It's lost its ability to come up with stuff that's new and exciting. And I
also think if they would maybe do better if they were willing to go back to the stuff that, if they're not going to come up with new stuff, they could at least go back to the old stuff that has some potential, which I feel like they don't do a very good job of doing anymore. Because Nintendo got a similar problem. Like you don't see a lot of brand new IP that catches and holds from Nintendo very often. Yeah, but they keep everything alive to some degree or another, despite what us Metroid or Star Fox fans might say here and there. But like Sega's got stuff we haven't seen hide or hair of in forever.
But then you try to revive it, and it always falls on its face.
It's always just a
Golden
weird
Axe or
Beast Rider, and but it's like, is it? Are you really going to tell me that like a really well-made, well-done Jet Set radio game couldn't get some traction today?
It could.
Or
I think a great Sonic game would be gigantic.
Yeah, or a good Phantasy Star
character. Yeah.
Like I know Phantasy Star Online 2 finally just hit Xbox and PC this past week or so.
Yeah.
But like, what about a really good single player, like Dragon Quest style, like Xenoblade style Phantasy Star,
like a real Phantasy Star.
Yeah. Like why not?
Well, but I just
Shinobi. Where the fuck is Shinobi?
I know.
People.
You have to find the right partners to build these games.
The only real thing, and I think the one sliver of what you said about the Sonic movie, I will agree with, is that's the only thing Sega has. Sonic is the only thing Sega has that kind of cachet today, and I think some of their other properties could. But they just let them languish.
Yeah.
So like Sonic for all his bad games and his shitty friends polluting his franchise has still been here the whole time. Yeah. And I think that's the key. Also, he wasn't on the Saturn, and that was probably a problem for the Saturn too.
That was a huge problem. Especially coming off, Sonic CD, which in my opinion is probably the best 2D Sonic or the best Sonic ever. So that is one of the. So I would agree with that on Sonic CD for the most part. The fandom hates that game. I know.
I'm well aware. Weird.
It is weird.
They all love Sonic 3, which is basically where I started to lose interest.
Me too. Yeah. Well, I guess you can see why I'm not a Sega fanboy. One of a million reasons.
I was a Sega fanboy for reasons other than Sonic.
Yeah. Mitch, do you think Sega will be around in 60 years?
I think in the trajectory they're in, it's a potential possibility, but mostly unlikely. I think Sonic Mania has kind of shown good faith to the Sonic fans that they can still make good Sonic games, even though it's like if I remember right, it's like a rehash of the first game, basically, or the second game of certain levels. But with the movie on top of this, there is potential that they could start swinging and turning itself around. They have the opportunity. They just have to take advantage of it.
They've already waited too long after the movie. Like they needed a Sonic game that came out while the movie was in theaters. It's too late now. Maybe when the sequel movie comes out,
or even a next gen game is coming out, and we just haven't seen it yet.
We may see next gen Sonic in the next 2 weeks. You don't know. I mean, it may be in an Xbox presentation, and maybe in a PlayStation presentation. There's no way of knowing right now.
Be probably wise to hold off to the sequel though, because the sequel looks like it'll have more of his friends in it, even expanded out a little better.
Yeah. I would be surprised if Sega makes it to 100. That to me is kind of the over-under on its history right now based upon where it's headed in its trajectory.
Here's the thing. I think they will continue to probably coast, and they do pretty well with the, Sammy has a bunch of the pachinko stuff in there.
Yeah.
Creative Assembly still is a good, factory for strategy stuff that sells well on PC. I feel like what might happen here is they might shift to movies because of the success of Sonic. I think we might start to see more Sega movies. You might get some traction on that. And at some point, some studio, like movie studio, buys them.
Interesting. A movie studio.
Disney absorbs them or something. And
just to get the IP.
I think the company wouldn't last, but the IP would last 60 years.
Yeah, I think Sonic will be around in 60 years. I just don't know who will own him.
Yeah. I'm asking about Sega, not Sonic.
Yeah.
Sega as a company. So 60, it's been a great 60 years in all honesty. Thank you, Sega, for all the hours and hours and hours and hours that you have given me through my life of entertainment. It's been an amazing ride, but the last 10 or 15 years have been really sad. Where's Virtua Fighter, Matt? Where is it? My personal favorite fighting game franchise. It's
definitely my favorite 3D fighting game.
Yeah.
And it just went away.
Where is it?
I mean, part of it is because the people who made it are gone.
Yep.
Like Yu Suzuki left, and all those people. AM2 is not the same team it used to be. It's the same thing with a lot of that. So it's like I would love to see another Panzer Dragoon game. But are the people who made Panzer Dragoon a really cool series there anymore? Like who makes it?
You'd have to get the band back together, basically.
Yeah. And like Yu Suzuki doesn't seem to want to do that. He wants to make really boring Shenmue games. So.
He does. So anyway, there you go. It's Sega's 60th anniversary. We're very appreciative for everything that company has done. And let's be honest, without Sega, we wouldn't be sitting here right now doing a podcast about video games because the industry would not be anything like what it is now if it weren't for Sega. Just think about the innovations it's had through the years. Not all have worked, but it was brave at certain points in its history. So
that's one of the reasons also that Genesis is a big moment, not because of the success or impact it had for Sega so much as if the Genesis hadn't come out, nothing would have prompted Nintendo to move forward with things.
Yep.
Like Nintendo would have been very, if you read the stuff about like kind of the histories of that era, the management of Nintendo at the time would have been very happy to ride that NES for another 6-7 years.
Absolutely.
And not forever. Like that's just what video games would have been. And so Sega was
showing the Sonic movie right now.
I apologize. I showed
there's a copyright strike. Done.
Shoot. Sorry.
I didn't have it in there. I didn't load it in.
You added in there.
Oh, I must have just grabbed Sonic or whatever.
I noticed.
Don't run anymore because I'm going to have to go and manually edit all that out now. In fact, we need to remove those from the TriCaster.
Okay, sounds good.
Are they hardcore about that?
Oh, yeah. At first, they weren't. So when we published the shows where we talked about the Sonic movie, they were fine. They all went through copyright, okay. And now, over the last 3 weeks, the movie studio, is it Paramount, I think, that owns it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they have gone back now and started fingerprinting all the trailers for the movie. And so all these old episodes of GameFace have started popping up copyright. It's an eternal battle that I wage behind the scenes at all times with YouTube.
I was going to be apologizing because I accidentally showed them the first character design of Sonic and how horrible it looks and said, I need to change this very quickly.
No, that old character design may have not popped copyright, actually.
Well, I switched between both trailers, so it might be there. But
yeah, that's bad. Well, I'll fix it when we get into edit. But anyway, it's Sega's 60th anniversary, birthday, whatever you want to call it. Congratulations. I don't think that they'll see another 60 unless they have a drastic change in leadership and direction.